Imagine the scene: 10,000 athletes gliding down the Seine for the grand opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympics. Just a few hundred meters away, inside a bustling McDonald's, employees are flipping burgers and asking customers if they want fries with that. But here's a question to think about: who makes more money, the athlete or the McDonald's worker? In fact, the McDonald's employee earns almost 50% more than the average Olympic athlete, despite the fact that these athletes are filling stadiums, generating billions in sponsorship money, and creating a spectacle watched by millions around the world. So what's going on? Why does an Olympic gold medalist make less than a fast food worker? The shocking reality: the International Olympic Committee doesn't pay athletes. Here's the truth that might surprise you: the International Olympic Committee does not pay athletes. Yes, you read that right. No matter how many gold medals an athlete wins, the International Olympic Committee doesn't cut them a direct paycheck. In fact, the only financial rewards Olympians receive from the Games are the medals they win, and even those come with no direct cash prize. This is in stark contrast to the billions generated by the event itself. The 2021 Tokyo Olympics, for example, brought in over $5 billion in television broadcasting rights alone. So how do Olympians actually earn money? The majority of Olympic athletes rely on sponsorships and endorsements to make a living. Top athletes like Roger Federer, LeBron James, and Serena Williams sign multi-million-dollar deals with companies like Nike, Under Armour, and Gatorade, while less well-known athletes struggle to secure even small sponsorships. But these opportunities are rare and highly competitive. In many cases, athletes must seek funding from national governing bodies, private sponsors, or even crowdfunding campaigns to pay for their training, travel, and competition expenses. The reality is that without these outside deals, most athletes would struggle to make ends meet. A journey through time, from olive wreaths to gold medals. The Olympic Games are steeped in tradition, and the way athletes are rewarded has evolved dramatically over time. To fully understand the financial disparities of today's Games, we need to travel back to the origins of the Olympics, over 2,700 years ago. In ancient Greece, the Games were more than just a sporting event. They were a religious festival, held to honor the gods, particularly Zeus. Athletes who triumphed were awarded an olive wreath, a symbol of honor and divine favor. However, the rewards for Olympic victors were not financial. Instead, winners enjoyed social prestige, access to lifelong privileges, and sometimes even the admiration of wealthy patrons. Some victorious athletes received cash prizes from sponsors, but these were not guaranteed. The first Olympic champion, Corroibos of Elis, a baker, earned only an olive crown and a palm branch for winning the sprint. These modest prizes reflect the original intent of the Games. They were about glory, not monetary reward. Most athletes were from wealthy families who could afford the time and resources needed to train for and compete in the Olympics, creating an elite, exclusionary culture in the early Games. The financial landscape of the Olympics began to change during the rise of the Roman Empire, which eventually led to the Games being shut down in 393 AD. It wasn't until 1896, when Pierre de Coubertin founded the International Olympic Committee, that the Games were revived. And this time, the idea of amateurism became central to the Olympic ideal. The amateurism trap, the case of Jim Thorpe. When the modern Olympics were first organized in 1896, the International Olympic Committee introduced the concept of amateurism, a rule that banned athletes from receiving any form of financial compensation for competing. The idea was that Olympic athletes should be driven solely by love for the sport, not the pursuit of money. This rule remained in place for decades and became a source of controversy, especially when athletes like Jim Thorpe were punished for violations. Thorpe, a legendary American athlete who won both the decathlon and pentathlon at the 1912 Stockholm Games, was considered by many to be the greatest athlete of his time. However, his Olympic career came to a tragic end when it was revealed that he had briefly played semi-professional baseball for $5 per game. This was considered a violation of the amateur rule, and as a result, the International Olympic Committee stripped him of his gold medals. Thorpe's case highlights the harshness of the amateurism rule. It also reveals how the International Olympic Committee's initial stance on amateurism was influenced by a desire to maintain the purity of the Games, even at the cost of athletes' livelihoods. For many athletes during this period, the pursuit of Olympic glory came at a high cost, both financially and personally. Thorpe's story serves as a reminder that the International Olympic Committee's strict stance on amateurism often excluded athletes from working-class backgrounds who didn't have the financial support to train and compete without earning money. It wasn't until the late 20th century that this restriction began to loosen, and athletes were finally allowed to benefit from sponsorships and endorsements. The transition from amateurism to sponsorship. By the 1960s and 1970s, the International Olympic Committee's stance on amateurism began to change. Brands like Adidas and Puma started to realize the marketing potential of sponsoring athletes, offering free gear in exchange for visibility at the Games. But by the late 1960s, it became clear that this gray area was no longer sustainable. The famous 1968 Olympic protest by Tommy Smith and John Carlos, during which they raised their fists in protest against racism while wearing Puma shoes, symbolized a turning point in the relationship between athletes and sponsorships. The International Olympic Committee could no longer ignore the reality that sponsors like Puma and Adidas were paying athletes to wear their gear, even if the athletes weren't officially receiving cash prizes. This unofficial sponsorship set the stage for the eventual relaxation of the amateurism rule. By 1971, the International Olympic Committee officially allowed athletes to sign endorsement contracts, though it was still a long time before these sponsorships became commonplace. The landmark shift in 1980s saw major endorsement deals between athletes and companies like Nike, Adidas, and Reebok. This era marked the beginning of the commercialization of the Games, as athletes began to be seen not just as competitors, but as brands themselves. The business of the Olympics. Big money, but not for athletes. Fast forward to the present day, and the Olympic Games are a multi-billion-dollar industry. According to reports, the International Olympic Committee generated more than $7 billion in revenue during the 2020 to 2021 Olympic cycle, primarily from broadcasting rights and sponsorship deals. Coca-Cola, Visa, and Airbnb are just a few of the major brands that have exclusive sponsorship agreements with the Olympics. But where does all this money go? Unfortunately, it rarely makes its way into the pockets of the athletes themselves. While the International Olympic Committee and corporate sponsors rake in billions, athletes are often left scrambling for funding. For many Olympians, securing sponsorships is crucial to making a living, but these deals are typically limited to the most high-profile competitors. Athletes in less popular sports often struggle to find funding or must rely on government grants or personal savings to finance their careers. The disparity between the vast profits generated by the Games and the paltry earnings of the athletes who make it all possible is a glaring issue that many believe needs to be addressed. Why do athletes make so little? The financial challenges facing Olympic athletes are complex. While the International Olympic Committee and global sponsors profit enormously from the Games, most athletes make very little in comparison. Even those who win medals can expect minimal compensation, with many relying on external endorsement deals or appearance fees to fund their training and travel. For athletes in niche sports, the struggle is even more pronounced. Without major sponsors, these athletes often live below the poverty line. The International Olympic Committee's reluctance to pay athletes directly is rooted in a desire to maintain the amateur spirit of the Games. But this stance is increasingly out of touch with the financial reality of modern sports. With billions of dollars at stake, it's time for the International Olympic Committee to rethink its policies and ensure that the athletes who make the Olympics possible receive a fair share of the profits. All right, folks, we've come to the end of today's deep dive into the world of Olympic athletes and their surprising earnings or lack thereof. Who knew that flipping burgers at McDonald's might actually be a more lucrative gig than winning Olympic gold? If that doesn't make you rethink your career choices, I don't know what will. But hey, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button.